The prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our Queen and to her government, to members of the Legislative Assembly and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Honourable members, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the Queen by Ms. Brooklyn Ellard. I would invite you to participate at your choosing. Please be seated.
Introduction of visitors. Introduction of guests.
Honourable members, it's my great pleasure to introduce a number of guests to you today. Seated in the members' gallery today is Elizabeth Delos Trinos, the constituency assistant for the Honourable Member for Edmonton Southwest. And today, I might add, is a very special day for her and her family, as today they became Canadian citizens. And I couldn't be happier. Since we're all celebrating happy days together, seated in the Speaker's Gallery is Emma Hopper. Emma works for the United Conservative Party caucus, and it is her birthday today. And equally as important, and I'm unsure if it's their birthday or any other wonderful day in their lives today, other than being here, seated in the galleries is Derek Graff, President of the Fort Saskatchewan Firefighters Association, and Glenn Ray, President of the Spruce Grove Firefighters. They are guests of the member for Edmonton Millwoods. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Millwoods and the Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we may not agree on much in this chamber, but I know that all members of this Assembly can agree that incredible bravery is shown by the men and women across our province who choose to fight fires. While doing their job, firefighters are routinely exposed to burning chemicals and other toxins. In just a typical residential structure fire, there can be over 265 known carcinogens. Because of these exposures, cancer is the #1 cause for firefighter line-of-duty deaths. I was proud to be part of the NDP government that updated the list of cancers that are presumed to be job-related so firefighters could be sure to get the support they need. With that update, Alberta had the most comprehensive coverage in Canada based on the science we had at the time. Since then, several more cancers have been linked to the profession, and jurisdictions like the Yukon and Manitoba have extended protections beyond what we have here in Alberta. Representatives of the Spruce Grove and Fort Saskatchewan firefighters are here with us today as part of a new lobby by the Alberta Firefighters Association to see improvements and expansion of presumptive cancer coverage for firefighters in Alberta. I want to thank them for their work. One of my immediate family members is a firefighter, one with a young family, and I'm extremely grateful for the advocacy work happening today. Those who've heard me talk in this place a time or two, both when I was the Labour Minister and now as the opposition critic for Labour, know that a safe and healthy workplace is incredibly important to me. Every worker deserves to come home safely at the end of their day. When injuries happen or occupational diseases develop because of their job, workers should get the help they need to recover and the support of our workers' compensation system. I urge the government to update the cancer supports for Alberta firefighters by adding thyroid, pancreatic, larynx, penile, mesothelioma, and soft tissue sarcoma to the list of presumptive cancers, and to work towards improving data collection for firefighting occupation. I hope all members will meet with the firefighters, and on behalf of this Assembly, thank you to Alberta's firefighters.
The honourable member for Highwood.
Mr. Speaker, we all know that Canada is facing a serious inflation problem of a kind we have not seen in decades. Thanks to the inflationary money printing policies of the federal government, rising energy prices, and increased costs for housing, it's now tougher for Canadians to make ends meet. What's worse is at a time when Canadians and Albertans actually need relief, the federal government is once again making life more expensive. Every Albertan who receives a paycheck should be aware that Ottawa is taking a bigger share of their earnings with the 2022 CPP payroll tax hike. The Trudeau government had the opportunity to take advice from Alberta and others to cancel this tax hike, but they chose otherwise. Now, with April 1st approaching, the Trudeau Liberals are about to spring another monumental tax hike on Albertans and all Canadians. This is no April Fool's joke. On April 1st, the Trudeau carbon tax is set to go up again, raising the cost of home heating, gassing up, fueling up, further driving up the cost of groceries and every product that is transported to store shelves. The cost of fuel and heating is already rising due to global instability and demand. But the Trudeau government is still intent on sticking to their hands further into the pockets of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that Alberta's government is standing with everyday Albertans and calling on the Trudeau government to stop the carbon tax hike. I'm standing here wondering if the folks across the aisle might have the courage to do the same. Will the NDP finally stand and admit that their carbon tax was so wrong for Albertans? Will they apologize for driving up the cost of energy? Albertans are watching. Now is the time. Instead of the NDP pretending they care about inflation, they need to admit their hypocrisy, put the interests of Albertans first, and call on their close friend Trudeau to stop the tax hikes.
The honourable member for Fort Saskatchewan-Bagotville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ukrainian people know the meaning of turmoil. They've lived it for centuries. When Putin and his communist socialist regime unleashed to attack Ukraine, he underestimated the sheer grit of Ukrainian people. He has the bigger, more powerful military, but he is grossly miscalculating Ukraine and its will to protect its sovereignty and democracy. Ukrainians are tenacious underdogs, fighters and survivors. I am concerned about the humanitarian crisis unfolding before our eyes. Homes are being bombed and hungry, desperate people are fleeing for their lives. Then yesterday, heavy fighting in Mariupol forced a humanitarian convoy to turn around. Putin's army attacked a maternity and children's hospital in Mariupol, killing innocent people. Sick children, women in labor were amongst the injured and killed. I have one question. How does the Putin regime see these women and children as a threat? I think about Ukrainian fathers and sons at war, worrying about their families. Are they okay? Are they safe? Where are they? Do they have food? Sends chills down my spine. Colleagues, we have a humanitarian crisis. Ukrainian people have not only lost their homes, they've lost their cities, they've lost their families. People are breaking into stores in search of food, melting snow for water, and hiding in their basements without heat and electricity. Ukraine is living in survival mode. Mr. Speaker, the past 2 weeks, 2.3 million people have left Ukraine. Many people, groups, and governments are stepping up, including ours. I'm proud that our Premier and government see the humanitarian need in Ukraine and are providing $11 million in humanitarian aid, $350,000 for local organizations involved in the aid programs. This will help provide much-needed initial aid for the people of Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, Ukraine will continue to stand strong against the tyranny of Putin. Ukrainians are strong, resilient, and will continue to fight for freedom.
The honourable member for Edmonton to court.
This year, the government will take $1 billion in higher income taxes from Alberta families. And while the Premier and Finance Minister try to tell Albertans that they are not, the facts are sadly not on their sides. Using de-indexation of the income tax brackets, this government has raised everyone's income taxes through a strategy known as bracket creep. Now, many of you watching at home may be asking, what is bracket creep? A very good question for which I will quote an expert on the subject. An expert for who years railed against this sneaky billion-dollar pickpocketing of taxpayers, who had strong words to describe bracket creep and the impact it has on Albertans, powerful words that I will read today. Bracket creep is a hidden tax grab, an enormous, insidious tax grab, an insidious tax on inflation that will mean Albertans pay more. It is a destructive tax on inflation, a pernicious, invidious tax. It is the heartless and insidious bracket creep that taxes the poor and forces low-income people onto the tax rolls. It is a tax grab that taxes people without their knowing. This once principled individual fought against bracket creep for nearly a decade. He accused those of supporting it possessing a twisted logic and called them bracket creeps. One only wonders what harsh words this individual would have for the Premier and Finance Minister, who have become the biggest defenders of bracket creep and who lack the courage to even admit it. But I have to imagine the career opponent of bracket creep would be angry, Mr. Speaker. He would be disappointed. He would be shocked, sickened, confused to see this. The individual I'm quoting today knows that what I'm saying about bracket creep is the truth. Mr. Speaker, each and every quote I said today came straight from the mouth of the member for Calgary Lougheed. So through you to the Premier, Mr. Speaker, what happened to you?
Good question. Here.
Well, I do provide the widest possible leniency inside a member statement. I did provide some significant comments just yesterday or the day before around referring to a member as an individual as pickpocketing. I'm pretty sure that's what happened in the member statement, and I'm sure it won't happen again. The honourable member for Edmonton, Leduc Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 long years, Alberta's budget is balanced. With our balance sheet back in the black, the lowest taxes in Canada, and essentially all restrictions now lifted, Alberta is truly starting to feel like Alberta again. We have the fastest growing economy in the nation, and our people are going back to work, with more than 130,000 net new jobs created in the past year alone. We are also seeing major private sector investment in every corner of the province that would not be possible without this economic turnaround. Budget 2022 is just more great news for Alberta's economic recovery, with significant investments in healthcare capacity, education, infrastructure, diversification, continuing care, and more. Albertans are celebrating this well-earned good news across the province. This is one incredible budget, said Calgary Herald columnist Don Braid. Boom, not gloom, said Edmonton Journal columnist David Staples, and Alberta's good news budget shows UCP policies work and the NDPs were a disaster, said Calgary Herald columnist Corbella. It's true that the only Albertans who aren't happy about this budget are the members across the aisle. The NDP is downright furious in chalking our balanced budget up to just high oil prices. But get this, Mr. Speaker, if oil prices were exactly where they were today, those reckless members would have posted a disastrous $6 billion deficit this year due to their out-of-control and reckless spending. We got here because our government established and followed a new set of fiscal anchors to get us back to balance. This included bringing our per capita spending in line with other provinces and keeping our net to GDP ratio low. And get this, Mr. Speaker, we cut taxes and we're bringing in more tax revenue than the previous government. This makes the NDP mad, Mr. Speaker. They're mad that we balanced the budget through fiscal responsibility and restraint. They're mad that Albertans are going back to work and earning more money. Well, the NDP can just stay mad, Mr. Speaker, because Alberta is moving forward. Our economic recovery is underway, and our greatest days are just ahead. Thank you.
The honourable member for Edmonton Maclong.
Alberta municipal leaders have voted overwhelmingly that they do not trust the Premier and his UCP government to manage a provincial police force. And who is to blame them? Let's just look at their track record and see. The Premier made it clear what he thinks about independent investigations when he fired the election commissioner, investigating members of the UCP caucus and the UCP leadership race. The same UCP leadership race that has been under a multi-year RCMP investigation for voter fraud, an investigation that saw multiple ministers, MLAs, and staff interviewed by the RCMP. Not a great start, Mr. Speaker. The previous Justice Minister felt that it was okay to directly call the police chief to discuss a $300 distracted driving ticket. This government's own report found that he tried to interfere with the administration of justice and as a result was no longer able to remain Justice Minister and was shuffled to that Labour portfolio. Instead of losing their ministerial position and being relegated to the back benches, as one would expect in a parliamentary democracy, this minister still gets to sit in the front row and collect his $181,000 salary. Another prime example of how poorly this government handles justice and enforcement issues was the Coutts blockade. Our province was losing over $44 million a day in economic revenue, crippling our supply lines and stopping our own products from getting to market just so this government's MLAs could appease the far-right base of the UCP. On top of the UCP's failures, the provincial police would cost hundreds of millions of dollars more annually to Albertans. This will be on top of the millions already downloaded onto municipalities in previous budgets, something this government has been refusing to acknowledge. Albertans can't trust this plan because they cannot trust this government, who have shown throughout their time in office that they are more focused on themselves than serving the people who elected them. Albertans need a government that respects the rule of law and will fight for justice. They will get it in 2023 from the NDP.
The honourable member for Calgary Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in this Assembly to highlight the importance of the balanced budget presented last month. Not only has this government's fiscal prudence set Alberta on a course for a bright future, but with this balanced budget, the government has been able to fund the Alberta at Work initiative, which is aimed at strengthening Alberta's workforce. In Budget 2022, the Alberta government highlighted the need to create more opportunities to enter, participate, and thrive within the workforce to underrepresented groups such as women, Indigenous people, and individuals who belong to visible minority groups. Through the Alberta at Work initiative, this government will invest $600 million over a span of 3 years to assist people from all walks of life enter and succeed in our workforce. Mr. Speaker, this new investment is particularly important to the people of Calgary Cross, as the communities encapsulated within this great constituency represent some of the most ethnically diverse communities in Alberta. The announcement of the Alberta at Work initiative is welcome news and will ensure that Albertans are given the life opportunities they need to thrive and prosper in our great province. All Albertans should have the same opportunity to engage in the workforce, no matter their race, religion, gender, or background. Creating more space for underrepresented members of our society to engage in the workforce is a key step in ensuring that Alberta is an economic workhorse that allows people from all over the world to come to this province and prosper. Alberta has always been a beacon of hope for so many people around the world looking for a better life. With this investment in the Alberta at Work initiative, Albertans can rest assured that this government has their back. Thank you.
The honourable member for Banff, Kananaskis.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta's finances are back in the black with a $500 million surplus. Now, for the past 2 years, we had heard the NDP cry that our cuts were too deep and our tax policies too radical, that reduced taxes would leave a gaping hole in the budget that could never possibly be recovered. Yet, 2 years later, when our government, surprise, delivered a balanced budget with a surplus, what did the NDP have to say about it? That it happened by accident. Well, Mr. Speaker, judging by the NDP's very own claims over the past 2 years, even they know that this budget wasn't balanced by accident. Yes, even through the toughest of economic times, our government was careful to bring Alberta's spending trajectory down, keep our debt to GDP ratio below 30%. We evened out our per capita spending to rival that of other provinces, and we forecasted the budget safely upon $70 per barrel WTI, despite peak prices now peaking above $120 per barrel, just to be safe and ensure we weren't hedging Alberta's money. And despite lowering the corporate tax rate to one of the lowest in North America, which the NDP swore would forfeit $4.7 billion of revenue, we brought in $5.1 billion of revenue because business and jobs from all over the world have flooded to our province because of this government's pro-business policies. Hear, hear. Mr. Speaker, even the CBC recognized that Alberta's financial position was no accident. To quote them, the simple reality is that the Premier can say that his government's hard work to control spending is what balanced the budget. Mr. Speaker, had fiscal prudence not been exercised, even with today's high oil prices, this government would have run a $6 billion deficit. So, Mr. Speaker, Albertans know the importance of fiscal responsibility. They know that every dollar government spends beyond budget limitations will inevitably be paid back through high inflation, devalued currency, or crippling taxation. And that's why they elected this government on a promise to balance our budget after years of tax and spend policies. So now, 1 year ahead of schedule, we can say, promise made, promise kept.
Honourable members, the time is 1:50, and that makes it oral question period. And question number 1 goes to the honourable member for Edmonton Glenora.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I wrote to the Minister of Education asking her to change course on her draft curriculum and to keep Ukraine, the country of Ukraine, in the elementary social studies curriculum. I am a Ukrainian Albertan, and I know full well that the choice to use the country of Ukraine in grade 3 social studies was deliberate. I strongly believe that we need to continue to educate young Albertans about Ukraine as an independent country with a rich, vibrant, and resolute history. So to the Premier, will you please commit right here and right now to leaving the country of Ukraine in grade 3 social studies?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, of course there will be content on Ukraine throughout the school curriculum. Mr. Speaker, the current draft is a high-level outline. It does not include every single point of information that will be presented to Alberta students. Ukraine is, of course, an important country to be taught about just in general terms, but it is of particular importance to Alberta, to the settlement of this province, and to its future, Mr. Speaker. And I hope we don't end up politicizing what I believe is a nonpartisan consensus in support of the people and the sovereignty of Ukraine.
The honourable member for Edmonton Glenora.
I appreciate the remarks that the Premier's made in the past about Ukraine and the importance that we make sure that we support Ukraine. One of the best ways the Premier could do that is right here, right now, today, stand up in this House and say he will leave the country of Ukraine, in grade 3 social studies. It's been taken out of his draft curriculum that everyone has discredited. Just commit right here, right now. Will the Premier please undo this horrific mistake? I'm going to hope it was just a mistake, and put the country of Ukraine, which is taken out of the elementary school social studies curriculum, will you put it back in for grade 3? Yes or no?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, I already answered the question, Mr. Speaker. This is a scope and a sequence document. It's high level. It doesn't mention all of the content. Of course there will be content in Ukraine, so please take yes for an answer. But, Mr. Speaker, Alberta has done more to demonstrate concrete solidarity with the people of Ukraine than any province in the country, perhaps any subnational jurisdiction in the world. $5 million to buy non-lethal military equipment, $6 million in emergency humanitarian support. I just met this morning with the president of the Canada-Ukraine Foundation. He said that the supplies that we are funding are already on their way to Kharkiv, to Kiev, and to Odessa.
The honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, I'm giving the Premier a third chance. Absolutely. I have to say, as Ukrainian Albertan, I appreciate his words. I think that one of the most powerful things we can do is make sure that kids have an opportunity to learn about the country, Ukraine. And yesterday I had to have a teachable moment to explain why we don't say the Ukraine. It is a country, it is a nation, that is not its official title. Premier, please help teach elementary children about the history, about the current role, about the country Ukraine, which you have taken out of your draft curriculum. It's wrong.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, nothing's been taken out. My record on these issues could not be more clear. As the federal multiculturalism minister, I provided a $10 million entitlement fund to their endowment, to the Ukrainian Canadian Foundation of Taras Shevchenko to teach about the reality of Ukrainian Canadian history and the internment of Ukrainian Canadians. And as Minister of National Defence, Mr. Speaker, I deployed the Canadian Armed Forces to Operation Unifier to help to train and modernize the Ukrainian military, an operation that has been extraordinarily successful in preparing Ukrainians for this fight to defend the sovereignty of their country.
The honourable member for Edmonton, Beverly Clareview.
In the last election, the Premier promised that his corporate tax handout was the silver bullet for our economy. He said all we had to do was cut the corporate tax rate and investment would come flooding back to the province. But even before the pandemic, investment fell, the economy shrank, and 50,000 jobs were lost. In other words, it failed. In estimates yesterday, the Minister for Jobs, Economy and Innovation said the corporate tax cut wasn't enough to attract investment and that they had to provide additional incentives to attract them to Alberta. Will the Premier finally admit his corporate tax handout and his economic plan is a complete failure?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's called leading with your chin. Because that's a member who claimed that there was a, quote, $4.7 billion corporate tax giveaway. Here's what actually happened. When the NDP raised the business tax rate by 20%, revenues plummeted because investment fled the province. When this government decreased the business tax rate by 1/3, guess what's happened? Revenues have increased. $400 million more revenue from our 8-point corporate tax than the 12-point tax being generated by the NDP. That's what growth does.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Beverly Clareview.
Overall investment, according to your own figures, is lower than under the NDP government. Despite the UCP's corporate tax cut failing, the Premier doubled down on it and accelerated the cut. He said companies would be, quote, irresponsible for not moving here. Since then, the number of head offices in Calgary has fallen from 117 to 102. Roughly 1/3 of office space continues to sit empty. And now capital investment is below levels seen under our government. Will the Premier, much like his Jobs Minister did yesterday, finally admit his corporate tax cut has failed to attract the investment he promised Albertans?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, after the NDP's job-killing business tax hike, which was informed by their class warfare socialism, guess what happened? We saw a huge flight of businesses and investment and jobs from this province, and they were only bringing in $2.4 billion on the corporate tax. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that based on the dynamic growth of this economy across all sectors and regions, we are now projecting $4.9 billion in corporate tax revenue.
The fact is, our capital investment in 2018 was almost $6 billion higher than your projections for this year, Premier. In the last election, the Premier promised his corporate tax handout would lead to tens of thousands of jobs for Albertans. But before the pandemic, 50,000 full-time jobs were lost. And in every budget, they've revised their job projections downward. They're now expecting 130,000 jobs less. Calgary has the highest unemployment rate among major cities in the country. His plan has failed to produce the results he promised. Does the Premier understand no one trusts him anymore with our economic future?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, last year, Alberta, second fastest job growth in the country, 130,000 net new jobs created. January of this year, 200,000 jobs lost across Canada, but 7,000 more jobs created in Alberta. In this budget, a projection of 4.5% employment growth, which is the average of private sector projections. Mr. Speaker, this economy, best year ever in tech, best year ever in ag, best year ever in film and television, best year ever in oil and gas, best year ever in forestry, best year ever in petrochemicals. This Alberta economy under our policies is taking off like a rocket.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest is next.
Mr. Speaker, under this UCP government, costs are rising in every way possible. If there's a way that they can make life less affordable for Albertans, they seem to find a way to make it happen. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Advanced Education signed off on an unacceptable tuition increase at the University of Alberta. It's also been confirmed that he approved increases at the University of Calgary. Extreme tuition increases like 32% increase in engineering, 25% for an MBA, 15.7% for tuition for medical students. Why does this Premier, what does he have against students? Why is he allowing such outrageous tuition increases?
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, we want to ensure that future graduates from Alberta colleges and universities have a strong economy in the long run. And that won't be the case if we burden them with tens of billions of dollars of debt, which is exactly what would happen under the NDP's reckless spending plans. We had to bring control back to Alberta's spending. And yes, that meant we challenged our universities to operate as efficiently as universities in BC and Ontario. They've done that. We congratulate them, Mr. Speaker. And the end of the day, but for the NDP to raise cost of living, Mr. Speaker, they're cheering on their ally Justin Trudeau to increase the carbon tax on April the 1st.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Mr. Speaker, this Premier needs to know that actions have consequences, and certainly his government just doesn't seem to understand that. Skyrocketing tuition fees have long-term implications. Alberta already falls short of other provinces in offering financial aid. Higher upfront costs creates barriers for our students. If students think that the increases are just not worth the money, or if they can't afford it, they just won't go to school, or they'll move out of the province. Why would this Premier support extraordinary tuition increases, decrease competitiveness, risk the option of people leaving Alberta, and create long-term disastrous consequences?
The Honourable the Premier.
In fact, Mr. Speaker, according to StatsCan, the average undergraduate tuition in Alberta is $6,500, and in Canada it's $6,700. Those students, Mr. Speaker, they also pay lower taxes here. They don't pay a sales tax. They have much lower housing costs. Why would somebody pick up and move to Toronto or Vancouver and pay 3 times the housing costs and pay a sales tax and pay more to heat their homes, while the NDP is cheering Justin Trudeau on to increase the cost of energy? Mr. Speaker, when it comes to issues like the cost of living, taking a lesson from the NDP, it's like taking a lesson from an arsonist on putting out a fire.
The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, this government's claim that the tuition in Alberta is lower than the national average, it simply isn't true. Universities, colleges, and polytechnics are scrambling to keep the lights on, and tuition increases, they're not the solution. Why would this Premier approve exceptional tuition agreements with our largest universities, download the costs onto the backs of students who are already suffering as this UCP government makes life unaffordable for Albertans?
Good question.
Honourable the Premier has the call.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is this. Had we continued with the NDP's reckless spending track of 4 or 5% annual growth in spending, we would still have a $6 billion deficit. And then in 2 years, an $8 billion deficit. And those very same students would have to pay back that debt through their taxes plus interest. Getting our finances under control is essential for the long-term stability and growth prospects of this economy that will benefit exactly those young Alberta students who will be graduating into the most dynamic economy this province has seen in many years.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Buffalo is next.
Mr. Speaker, today I spoke to the Alberta Municipalities Spring Leaders Caucus, and boy was there frustration in the room caused by a UCP government that is willing to use the legislative hammer to override the authority of local governments. Mr. Speaker, this isn't about masks or who should be able to make health decisions. This is about a Premier picking yet another fight to shore up his failing leadership, and that's very sad. Why doesn't the Premier withdraw his offensive Bill 4, apologize, and pledge to restore trust with Alberta's elected municipal leaders? Sorry.
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, what he's talking about is the NDP's desire to force Edmontonians, against their wishes, to continue to wear masks, Mr. Speaker, just like the NDP sent out the NDP Labour Federation to sue the government to force 5-year-olds to wear masks indefinitely, just like their allies at the Teachers Union threatened to sue us to force kids to wear masks. Then their NDP allies on Edmonton City Council tried to force Edmontonians to wear masks. Guess what? 68% of Edmontonians said no, and we support them.
The Honourable Member.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, according to an Ipsos poll, only 20% of Albertans think the Premier should even stay on as Premier. That's how badly he's damaged public trust in this province. Mayors and reeves across Alberta are telling me they don't trust this government because of endless cost downloading, forced changes to police funding, a massive cut to MSI, and heavy-handed top-down legislation. Why won't the Premier reverse his approach and start working with municipal leaders as partners?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, we have and we do, Mr. Speaker. I had a number of municipal mayors and councillors come up to me today and say, you know what, thank you for giving a positive speech to us without attacking the opposition. They said, we wish the NDP had done the same. Mr. Speaker, it's always divide and attack. Just like they want to divide Albertans on public health policy, they want their NDP allies on Edmonton City Council, who have no competence in public health policy, no jurisdiction in that, to force this city to wear masks while the rest of the province is not. Why doesn't the NDP stand up for the citizens of Edmonton?
The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, municipalities are our partners in improving the lives of Albertans and recovering our economy. They create jobs and provide essential public service. Yet that's not how many in the UCP caucus see it. The member from Lac St. Anne Parkland made that clear in an interview. Speaking to the media, he said municipalities are, quote, children of the province, and sometimes children need to be spanked. That's incredibly disrespectful and wrong-headed, Mr. Speaker. Does the Premier agree with his member? And if he doesn't, why does he keep that member around?
Yeah.
The Honourable the Premier.
Mr. Speaker, as we move on getting our lives back to normal, Albertans want this province to be united, and they want consistency when it comes to public health measures. What the NDP wants is continued division and complexity. They want the NDP hardcore members of Edmonton City Council to improvise their own public health policy against the clear wishes of Edmontonians, Mr. Speaker. We are providing a very limitation so we can have one clear, consistent, and united provincial approach to this question.
The Honourable Member for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The prenatal period is the most important period for a child. This time period influences a child's development through to their formative years. As the overall cost of living continually rises, expectant mothers on income support and AISH are desperately in need of support during this period. To the Minister of Community and Social Services, how will you provide support for vulnerable expectant mothers?
The Honourable the Minister of Community and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member, for this great question. Our government understands that women with limited resources often face a number of challenges during pregnancy. Therefore, today, with Premier, myself, and the Associate Minister of Status Women, we announced a new prenatal benefit for pregnant women on AISH and income support program. Starting at their second trimester, they will receive $100 additional prenatal benefits until the baby is born. Mr. Speaker, this demonstrates a tangible, common-sense way of helping Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for the reply. Given that prenatal support is critical for vulnerable women all throughout their pregnancy, and given that income supports and AISH provides a one-time natal benefit of $256, again to the Minister, can you explain how this new prenatal benefit will add to the existing program?
The Honourable the Minister of Community and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, we have a one-time special diet program for prenatal mothers to use. That is $256. With this new addition of $600 on top of that, $856 will place Alberta as the highest jurisdiction in Canada provide prenatal benefit for our vulnerable Albertans. Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of the strong stand we're taking.
The Honourable Member for Fort Saskatchewan-Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again to the Minister for the response. This benefit enables a mother to purchase the much-needed necessities for her baby. These necessities can be anything from car seats, cribs, strollers, blankets, and diapers. Again, to the same Minister, in what way will today's announcement of the new natal benefit improve lives?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again for the great question here. As we know, when we have the added benefits for expectant mothers, they can use the money for nutritious food, vitamin, cribs and clothing, and safe and healthy infant care. Research has repeatedly shown that good nutrition and low-stress home environment set the baby up for success. Can you imagine with this added benefits to expectant mothers, when the baby is born healthy, when they grow to school, when they get a job, what a fantastic future will be.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Mountain View has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity, and it's quite simple. What is the average monthly rate Albertans are paying for natural gas and electricity right now, and how does it compare to the same time period last year?
The Honourable the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity.
Mr. Speaker, how embarrassing for the members opposite. This is pure NDP economics, Minister. Mr. Speaker, the first thing they do is they cancel the cheapest form of electricity this province has. Then they ring up the transmission bill to the tune of $7.5 billion, which our economy could not support. They lose a further $1.2 billion on the balancing pool, Mr. Speaker, and then they implement the carbon tax, the biggest tax in our province's history, and then they ask why electricity prices are going up. What a shame.
The honourable member for Calgary Mountain View.
Given that the answer is that both electricity and natural gas have nearly doubled in that time period, and given that the minister doesn't seem to have a clue, and given that he really wants to blame his problems on everyone else, but the truth is the price for solar power is considerably lower than many other sources of generation, and given that the official opposition would bring in a real rebate program, can the minister tell families why he thinks it's just the system working when they're paying so much more? This minister has been in charge for 3 years. How about a little responsibility?
The Honourable the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, we are a leader in Canada in market-based renewable energy, and we're very proud to embrace that the power source. But, Mr. Speaker, let me just say, the NDP actually got what they wanted. They brought in the first carbon tax, and everybody knows the goal of the carbon tax is to increase the price of everything. Well, now they got their wish. It's more expensive to drive your car. It's more expensive to heat your home. Mr. Speaker, everything is more expensive because of the NDP, and they have the audacity to ask why?
The honourable member.
Given that the minister should be embarrassed to be spewing that level of misinformation in response to a simple question, and given that when I asked him in November whether he would do anything to help Albertans, he proudly rose in this House and said he planned to do nothing, and given that even now, after months of struggle, all he has provided is a fake natural gas rebate and $50, can this minister explain to families how $50 is going to make a difference when they're drowning in thousands of dollars in debt?
The Honourable the Associate Minister of Natural Gas and Electricity.
Mr. Speaker, I will set the record straight so the member opposite can stop embarrassing herself. I was asked if I would be interested in bringing in a market price cap, and I said no, because consumers can already have a rate cap, Mr. Speaker. All they have to do is call the utility consumer advocate, and anybody who wants the benefit of a price cap can have one, Mr. Speaker. Again, we are dealing with high
Order. The Associate Minister is a very verbose way of answering questions, and even still it's difficult to hear him. The Honourable the Associate Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to get over my shyness and speak a little louder. But I will say this. We recognize that it was poor policies on behalf of the NDP government, and we are bringing in solutions that will help bring down costs long term, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Mr. Speaker, it would be laughable if it wasn't so serious. Listening to this government talk about the respect they have for post-secondary education. Yesterday, we learned that the Minister of Advanced Education was signing off on hikes of 16 to 184%, which will add significant costs to students. Yep. These costs will add stress and could even push students to leave Alberta altogether. So rather than talking about how this government values students, would the minister explain why he thinks a student facing a 104% tuition hike will be better off?
The Honourable, the Minister of Advanced Education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite should know that answer because it was their government that wrote the regulation that permits exceptional tuition increases. And under the regulation is very clear. Exceptional increases are only allowed if they demonstrate improvements to the quality of the program. All of these programs will see significant quality improvements. The universities will be able to increase work-integrated learning opportunities, hire more faculty, and create a higher quality experience for the students.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Riverview.
Given that in a time when more mental health supports are needed, this government is doubling the cost to become a counselling therapist from over $4,000 to over $8,500 per year. Given that there is currently a massive unmet need for mental health supports, and given that one of the biggest obstacles is access to mental health providers, How can the minister justify making it more difficult to become a councillor, especially when there is so much need?
The Minister of Advanced Education.
Another one, Mr. Speaker. The member should know the answer to that. The details are in the regulation as well that stipulate that these increases must go directly to improving the quality of education. However, apart from that, in reviewing these increases, it was important for me to ensure that a portion of the revenue was being used to create additional student assistance. And in fact, that is the case. And all of these increases, revenue is being set aside to ensure that there is additional assistance for students in those programs.
The honourable member.
Given that this pandemic has been stressful for students who have had to make multiple transitions from in-person to online learning amidst other stresses, and given that this government talks a big game about how they support mental health, but are limiting access with higher costs for students and doubling the cost to become a counselling therapist, can the minister explain how making it harder for students to enter the mental health field addresses the mental health crisis they claim to care about? Will he reverse the hike?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2022 includes $171 million over 3 years to create 7,000 additional spaces in our post-secondary system, more spaces than they ever created in our post-secondary environment as well. It also includes $12 million over 3 years to expand our existing scholarships. It also includes $15 million over 3 years in funding to create new bursaries to support low-income students to ensure every Albertan can access post-secondary education. I know the member from Edmonton Northwest thinks that Stats Canada is lying, but tuition fees today are lower than the national average.
The honourable member for Cypress, Medicine Hat.
In 2018, UCP members voted for a policy to restore Alberta's flat tax, explicitly instructing the UCP not to wait until the budget was balanced. But in an I hold the pen move, the flat tax policy was removed from the UCP's platform, saying that the government would further improve Alberta's tax competitiveness once the budget is balanced. Guess what? Energy prices balance the budget. To the Minister of Finance, why can't you respect the democratically expressed wishes of your own members and make our flat tax government policy?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs, the Economy and Innovation has risen.
Mr. Speaker, we're so proud of the budget that our Finance Minister brought in, Mr. Speaker. The first balanced budget in years, Mr. Speaker, with a forecast for brighter days ahead for Alberta. Mr. Speaker, this government is focused every single day on attracting jobs, attracting investment into this province, Mr. Speaker. Our economy is more diversified than ever. It's a team approach, and our Finance Minister is doing an amazing job at that.
Honourable Member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Given not only has this government failed to make good on the flat tax promise, it actually nailed Alberta families with a sneaky backdoor income tax hike. Given de-indexing tax brackets from inflation has cost Alberta families hundreds of millions of dollars, and the minister has refused to accept any firm plan to end this bracket creep tax hike, citing that economies need to improve. And given that the minister has hundreds of millions for unbudgeted announcements just 2 weeks before the leadership review, can the minister tell us when he will stop his sneaky backdoor taxes on Alberta families?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs, the Economy and Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, as that member knows, and he ran on the platform to make sure we restored balance to Alberta's books, Mr. Speaker, mission accomplished for Albertans, and our Finance Minister has done an amazing job getting that done. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, we've done everything possible to get Albertans back to work. 130,000 jobs created last year, Mr. Speaker, and with the rest of the country lost 200,000 jobs in January, Alberta added 7,000 jobs, Mr. Speaker. Just because that member's bitter, Mr. Speaker, that the economy is turning around, it doesn't mean that we're going to lose focus on making sure we provide jobs for Albertans.
The honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, in estimates this week, the minister responded to a question from the opposition asserting that bracket creep tax increases are a fiscally conservative policy. That must be news to the Premier, who once wrote a column in the Calgary Herald describing bracket creep as a, quote, hidden and regressive tax grab. To the minister, can you please explain to Albertans how a hidden and regressive tax grab is United Conservative fiscal policy?
Point of order is noted at 219. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Alberta has the lowest taxes in Canada, period. And our finance minister has done an amazing job balancing the books of Alberta. And Mr. Speaker, it's a testament to the entrepreneurs of this province, Mr. Speaker, the fact that Alberta's economy is rebounding, more diversified than ever. Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, is seeing record years. We've got manufacturing, logistics investments, Mr. Speaker, film and television that's happening in this province, record years, technology and innovation. Mr. Speaker, Alberta's economy is stronger than it's been in a long time, Mr. Speaker, and there's brighter days ahead.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Ellerslie is next.
Mr. Speaker, there's perhaps no greater evidence of how entitled this government is than their use of the 11th floor of the Edmonton Federal Building, better known as the Sky Palace. You know the Sky Palace. It hosted the Premier's illegal white tablecloth budget whiskey dinner last year while the rest of us did the responsible thing and just stayed home. I know the Premier has been using the Sky Palace while getting this office remodeled and renovated. Can the Infrastructure Minister tell this House how much money went into moving in and out of the Sky Palace and whether any renovations were done at all?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure is risen.
Mr. Speaker, as you see outside of this large building, there is a repair going on. That's why when the Premier's office was being impacted with those repairs, we moved them to the federal building and brought them back. We only spent less than $8,000 on that move, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member.
Given that Albertans are struggling with the cost of living and this government just doesn't care, and given that I would hope that everyone in this House would agree that a better use of money would be supporting struggling Alberta families than sprucing up this Premier's preferred dining establishment on the 11th floor of the Federal Building so he can host more secret gatherings with his closest allies. Can the Minister table in this House by the end of the week every single receipt from her expenses related to renovations of the Sky Palace and hosting in the Sky Palace? If he won't produce them, what is he hiding?
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
I'm not hiding anything, Mr. Speaker. I look the same with clothes or without clothes. So I'm as transparent as possible, and I already answered that question at the budget estimates, and I already shared that information. We haven't spent any extra money in that office to accommodate Premier. We already said that many times. I'm repeating it again.
The Honourable Member.
Given the depths that past Conservative premiers and infrastructure ministers have gone to conceal the construction of a luxury apartment in the Sky Palace, and given that the last thing Albertans want to do is wake up and find that while this government won't lift a finger to help them pay their skyrocketing bills, they shoveled money into the Sky Palace, so will the Minister of Infrastructure agree and commit that he will go before a committee reporting to this House to develop a clear set of rules for use of the Sky Palace moving forward? Mr. Speaker, no one trusts this Premier or anyone in that UCP.
The Honourable the Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I already answered that office. If that honourable member wants to tour that office with me, I'll give him a tour of that office, how that office is being used. This member is spreading misinformation, and he can come and take a first-hand view of that office. There is nothing to hide about that office. It's available for use for the government purpose, Mr. Speaker.
The order. The Honourable Member for Edmonton Meadows is next.
It's tragic. Albertans are seeing increasing number of racist incidents and hate crimes being faced by racialized and minority communities in this province. We have seen racialized Albertans being harassed, subjected to racist and disgusting language, and even assaulted. Even every Albertan has a right to live in a province free from racism, hatred, and intolerance, and they deserve a government that will take action to address it. It is concerning to see that not a single dollar in this budget is targeting the elimination of racism in Alberta. My question to the Minister of Justice: why is his budget silent on fighting racism?
The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Well, first, let me, through you, thank the member for the question. This is a very serious
issue that the government takes very seriously, Mr. Speaker, but the premise of the question is false. We're over doubling the funding for the Alberta Security Infrastructure Program to $5 million per year to increase safety for Albertans served by facilities that are targeted by hateful violence and vandalism. So unfortunately, his question is incorrect. We have doubled this funding, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue through my honourable colleague, the Associate Minister of Multiculturalism, continue to work with communities and to address their concerns.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Meadows.
Given that the UCP government has done nothing more than lip service when it comes to supporting the racialized communities of our province, even as racialized communities and community members are calling for action. Given that this government has delayed for too long the release of the Anti-Racism Advisory Committee recommendations, leaving many Albertans concerned that addressing the growing number of hate crimes in Alberta is not priority for this government, what message does this Justice Minister have for the racialized communities of Alberta who expected support in this budget and got nothing?
The Honourable, the Associate Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the questions. Albertans from all backgrounds deserve the freedom and protection they need to live and worship safely and freely from threats of violence and destructions. This government has done so much for newcomers, Mr. Speaker, that I'm so proud of, including from credential recognition to fairness for new offers to grants for funding for places of worship and multiculturalism. And we have $620,000 in our ministry from Ministry of Culture to support our efforts.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Meadows.
Given that the growing number of hate crimes was acknowledged in the government's throne speech, but then nothing was offered to the budget, in the budget to help. And given that this government has dragged its heel over and over, and given that my colleague, the member for Edmonton City Centre, will bring forward legislation this session to establish a process for collecting race-based data. Does the Minister of Justice support collecting race-based data? If he doesn't, can he explain his reasoning for not supporting something critical to combating racism that is being done in other provinces?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, first let me supplement my honourable colleague's answer and confirm that we also have provided emergency grants of various amounts to be able to show the communities throughout the province that we take these issues very seriously. We support law enforcement and targeted groups to keep vulnerable Albertans safe, Mr. Speaker, and put criminals behind bars. And it's important that vulnerable Albertans and those who would target them to see that government will not tolerate these actions, Mr. Speaker. And we're proud to have the support of our compassionate and caring communities behind us.
Honourable Member for Chestermere Strathmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Within my riding, the community of Chestermere, there's a very busy road that extends from Calgary at the east end of 17th Avenue and transitions to the west end of Chestermere Boulevard. In 2019, Maclean's reported that Chestermere was the third fastest growing community in Canada, and with this population growth came an increase in traffic, and that now accommodates approximately 3 times the amount of traffic than the road is built for. To the Minister of Transportation, would the government consider expanding this road to 2 vehicle lanes in each direction to better accommodate thousands of commuters?
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Honourable Member for that question. But before answering the question, I'd like to take the opportunity to speak to all Albertans and everybody in this chamber and wish them a happy, belated International Women's Day.
Hear, hear.
I was pleased to make an announcement a few days ago in announcing a $3 million investment to help support women who are seeking job opportunities in the transportation sector. Now, in answer to this question, Mr. Speaker, 17th Avenue and Chestermere Boulevard is a local road that is a responsibility of both the City of Calgary and the City of Chestermere. Alberta Transportation has not communicated directly with the City on the topic of...
The Honourable Member for Chestermere Strathmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that the City of Calgary completed their options evaluation input summary on the 17th Avenue Southeast corridor, receiving input from partners including surrounding landowners, community associations, and government representatives, would the government then complete a similar consultation and evaluation with the process and the residents and stakeholders of Chestermere and surrounding area who are deeply affected by the capacity limitations of this road?
The Honourable the Minister of Transportation.
Mr. Speaker, my department is aware of the local road network in and around the City of Chestermere and is in contact with the City and County officials. While Alberta Transportation is responsible for the provincial highway network, local roads and streets are maintained by various counties, municipal districts, towns, and cities. Mr. Speaker, I'm confident that the City of Chestermere will engage with residents on ways to improve Chestermere Way if that's what the City Council decides to do.
Honourable members, if you'd like to have a private conversation, there's lots of places to do that. The chamber isn't one of them. The Honourable member for Chestermere Strathmore.
Thank you. I'll have to listen to you and Hansard later. Given that the need for the increasing capacity of this road is apparent, and if the consultation process between stakeholders and government agencies occurs to identify and determine with the certainty that this road expansion will require this, would the government be able to give some potential help with the future of this project?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a member mentioned earlier, Chestermere is one of the fastest growing communities in Canada, which creates challenges in respect to their commuter networks. There is no process in place for Alberta Transportation to fund road work on 17th Avenue, Chestermere Boulevard, because it is a local road. However, the City is able to use its MSI or federal gas tax fund to address upgrades on this road or in any other community.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford has the next question.
Thank you. Quote, "The grief we felt while discovering our stolen children has opened fresh wounds," end quote. Mr. Speaker, that's Chief Sidney Hallcrow of the Capoeano First Nation, who last week announced the discovery of 169 graves at the former St. Bernard residential school site. They did this on their own dime, as they did not want to wait any longer for provincial support. To the Minister, what funding is the Government of Alberta providing to this First Nation to complete and accelerate their work to confirm and discover the graves of their children?
The Honourable the Minister of Indigenous Relations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. I know the Minister has a great heart for the Indigenous people, so I appreciate the question. And actually, Mr. Speaker, we did come up with what we called our Community Research Grant. It was an $8 million grant. And I'm happy to say we went through all the numbers this morning, and everyone that applied for a grant did get one. Up in the Capoeano area, they actually went together 4 groups as a joint application, and we did give out that grant. They did receive the grant, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so happy that they were able to utilize that.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Rutherford.
Thank you. Given that the government announced the $8 million last June to support First Nations who want to lead this work in their communities, I was concerned to hear the chief say that they didn't want to wait for provincial funding and that they chose to proceed on their own. Can the Minister explain what is happening? Why are there delays to funding promised to assist in finding the unmarked graves of children in Alberta?
The Honourable the Minister of Indigenous Relations.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you again for the question. And as soon as we heard about the discovery in BC, we got into action right away, Mr. Speaker. And I was so proud of the other ministries that stepped up and helped us put the grant together to aid the communities, Mr. Speaker. And the group went together. We put a group together in our ministry and started working on it right away. And I'm happy to say that they were able to meet the demands that all came in. And there's also a federal grant process that I've been in contact with the federal minister with to aid if there's any additional monies that need to be spent.
Honourable Member.
Thank you. Given that this is an extremely sensitive and painful process for Indigenous communities, and it must be led by communities, and given that the province's role is to ensure that resources are readily available to support the search for remains or the commemoration of the lost, will the Minister accept responsibility for the unfortunate delay in releasing funds and commit to doing a better job in the future? There's no doubt we will find more of these burial sites, and the government promised to help. Where is the help?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Speaker. And our hearts do go out for the communities. And I was actually on site at Capoeano when they actually started the ground penetrating radar and walked the grounds there. So I understand the intergenerational trauma that's happening out there, and that's why I was also happy that mental health stepped up and provided a grant as well for mental health assistance with those communities. So we were able to provide 2 grants, Mr. Speaker, and those grants have gotten out the door. And like I say, there is other help available, and we'll walk that walk with those communities because it is such a sensitive issue. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton City Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After decades of Conservative announcements, cancelled announcements, and more delays, our government committed to and started the construction of the Calgary Cancer Centre. That was wonderful news for the people of Calgary to see that project that had been used as a prop by past governments finally get underway. But after watching this government fight with and undermine our frontline healthcare workers for years, now many are still concerned about this government's actual commitment to this critical project. So will the health minister commit that the Calgary Cancer Centre will be fully staffed when it opens? And if not, and if so, why is it not funded in this budget?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, as you know, the health budget here has $600 million more this year than last year in terms of budget, and another $1.8 billion over the next 3 years. Mr. Speaker, we are also contributing $3.5 billion into capital, including completing the Calgary Cancer Centre. And I can actually tell the honourable member across the way, our government is committing to be able to staff this, get it up and running when my honourable colleague, Minister Panda, will be, sorry, my apologies, where my honourable colleague, the Minister of Infrastructure, will be able to turn over the keys to Alberta Health, and then we'll be able to get the staff in there.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, given that I appreciate those words, but I do not see in this budget where they are in fact planning for the staffing of the Cancer Centre, and given that most people in healthcare would tell this government that getting the building ready is only half the battle, and given that I know this government's had a troubled relationship with the Calgary Centre, given that it possesses members, even ministers, who worked hard at cancelling, moving, or delaying that project in past governments, can the health minister promise that every single bed will be open and be ready to receive patients when the facility opens? Well, Albertans have to wait until the NDP are back in government to see this project brought to life.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said in my previous answer, we are committing to be able to staff. There will be staff moving within the Foothills campus over to the new Calgary Centre, and this will be one of the top centres for dealing with cancer patients, not only for Calgary, for southern Alberta, and across Western Canada. And Mr. Speaker, I am very much looking forward to the tremendous work being done by my colleague, the Minister of Infrastructure, in completing this and then turning the keys over to us so we can actually start ensuring that we have the equipment ready on time, we can train up the staff, and we get that fully staffed and be able to provide services to all.
The honourable member for Edmonton City Centre.
Given I appreciate the minister's commitment that some existing staff will be moving over, but we're talking about all of the staff that will be needed. And given the actions of the Premier, the Finance Minister, and the former Minister of Health has meant that frontline healthcare workers have felt attacked by this government since day one. And given that during a pandemic, they tore up agreements with doctors, threatened to slash the pay of nurses, created a hostile atmosphere that drove healthcare workers out of Alberta for friendlier places. And given that, again, we are not seeing in this budget specific allocations to fully staff the Calgary Cancer Centre, is that perhaps because this government has made it so difficult to attract and retain healthcare workers in our province?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government is committed to be hiring and ensuring that we have the healthcare staff to provide the health services that Albertans need. Mr. Speaker, not only have we committed an additional $1.8 billion on the expense line in our budget, we have hired additional staff over the last number of years. Mr. Speaker, AHS has had over 1,700 more RNs compared to February 2020 that we've had previously. We have the highest level of RNs than we've ever had in our history. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we continue to attract doctors in the province. That number continues to go up, and we're going to continue to work to make sure we have the staff we need to deliver.
The honourable member for Airdrie East has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A strong, steady, and dependable EMS system is crucial to the Alberta healthcare system. It's important that every community in Alberta can access emergency medical response in a reasonable time. Over the last couple of years, Alberta's EMS system has been under great strain and is not meeting the needs of Albertans that they deserve. Given that our government has recognized this challenge and has taken big steps to improve Alberta's EMS system, can the Minister of Health please give us a progress report on improving Alberta's EMS system?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question. We've had multiple conversations on this particular issue, particularly in relation to Airdrie. Mr. Speaker, Alberta's EMS workers provide life-saving services to so many people in the province, and I want to thank them through you for all the tremendous work they've done, particularly through challenging times through COVID and the increase of the call volume. As a government, we are acutely aware of the challenge, and that's why we're taking action in Budget 2022 by increasing EMS funding by 12.2%. Mr. Speaker, that's an additional $64 million, Mr. Speaker, an increase that goes directly to adding more ground ambulances and crews and addressing issues that we have with recruiting and retention paramedics throughout the province.
The honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. That's great news. Given that the lack of ambulances in Airdrie caused one of my constituents who suffered a pediatric cardiac arrest to wait over 20 minutes before an ambulance arrived, and given that another one of my constituents that had a blood clot moved to their lungs, causing them to pass out, had to wait on the floor for 28 minutes before an ambulance arrived, and given that these are not the only serious incidences like in my constituency, can the Minister tell us what they are doing to improve EMS in Airdrie?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker, for the question, and thank you to the member. I have some excellent news for the people of Airdrie, Mr. Speaker. Budget 22 is moving forward with our plan to strengthen EMS. We'll be adding a new ambulance in Airdrie over the next month. We are also adding 10 new ambulances in Calgary in the next 2 years to ease the pressure on Airdrie's EMS. We also rolled out elements of the Metro Response Plan on February the 7th. And Mr. Speaker, that is having results. This plan has reduced more than 43% EMS services going to neighbouring centres from Airdrie.
The honourable member.
Services to
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, on behalf of Airdrie. We're very grateful. Given that healthcare is the #1 issue in Airdrie, and I've heard loud and clear from my constituents about their concern with the lack of treatment spaces, doctors, and standard treatments, and given that Airdrie has a population of over 75,000 people and is the fastest growing city in Canada, and further given that the people of Airdrie deserve to have the same quality of healthcare as other Albertans, can the Minister please tell us what steps are being taken to improve healthcare at the urgent care facility in Airdrie?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 22 is about building health capacity. And this government is listening to Albertans about the pressures on our healthcare system, including the advocacy of the honourable member. We're moving forward with the Alberta Surgical Initiative. We're spending $133 million to build new surgical spaces. We're also spending $100 million to add up to 50 ICU spaces across the province, Mr. Speaker. Alberta's government is moving forward to provide every patient with the surgery they need within the wait times medical experts recommend. We'll continue to look at new ways to expand healthcare capacity, including in Airdrie.
Honourable members, this concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In 30 seconds or less, we will return to the remainder of the daily routine. The honourable member for Cypress Medicine Hat has a statement.
The war in Ukraine, just a couple weeks old, is reshaping global economics and politics in real time. As an increasing number of countries around the world move to ban imports of Russian oil, global demand for energy products continues to rise. Yet, Alberta is set to miss out on what could have been the biggest boom in a generation. Instead, billions will flow to dictators and authoritarian regimes in the Middle East, Africa, and even Venezuela. The world's worst abusers of human rights will be richly rewarded, while Alberta workers struggle with unemployment and empty office towers. Let's face it, Canada's energy policy is an abject failure. Our province is home to some of the largest energy reserves in the world. Our labour force is young and well educated. We develop our resources in a way that meets with the highest safety and environmental standards. Yet, even in a world begging for energy, we have very little capacity to increase production and meet this demand. Instead of being part of the solution, we are part of the problem. How did it come to this? Ottawa's hostility to Alberta energy is well known. Policies like the carbon tax, the No More Pipelines bill, and the tanker ban have made it impossible for private sector investors to proceed with major projects. Even now, with the price of oil well over $100, TC Energy has stated again it will not revive the Keystone XL pipeline. Yet, if we're being honest with ourselves, we can't dump 100% of the blame on Ottawa. For the past 3 years, Alberta's government has offered no consequences for Ottawa's encroachment on provincial jurisdiction. And like the NDP before it, this UCP government has wasted untold millions trying to buy social license. But what good has it done us? And what good has it done the world around us? Instead of virtual signaling on issues like net zero or the Paris Accord, it's time to get back to what actually works for our province. Albertans don't succeed because of government. We succeed despite government. Alberta can and should be the freest and most prosperous place.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions.
The honourable member for Leduc Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As chair of the Standing Committee on Private Bills and Private Members' Public Bills, I request leave to present in accordance with Standing Order 98-2 two petitions that have been received for private bills. The petition of Shannon Dorham, President and CEO of the Calgary Young Men's Christian Association, for the Calgary Young Men's Christian Association Amendment Act 2022, and the petition of Janet McCready, Board Chair, and Josh Trapto, General Manager of the Calgary Heritage Authority, for the Calgary Heritage Authority Amendment Act 2022.
Notices of motions, introduction of bills, tabling returns and reports.
Are there tablings? Seeing none.
Tablings to the clerk, deferred divisions.
Honourable members, we are at points of order. And at 2:19, the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader rose on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be brief on this point of order. This point of order was called when the honourable member from Cypress Medicine Hat was speaking, delivering his second supplemental. It is common practice in this chamber that the second supplemental not be in the form of a question and not include a preamble. That member's second supplemental did the complete opposite. It was, in fact, contravention of the procedures of this place. If we refer to House of Commons procedure and practice, if we'd like to, 1975, Speaker Jerome stated that a supplementary question arises from the minister's response and that it should be put in precise and direct terms without any preamble, prior statement, or argument. This is a member who's been in the chamber for a number of years, what's affectionately referred to as the Dean of Caucus. I expect a higher level of understanding of the procedures and practice, and I ask the member improve the level of his questions going forward and apologize for contravening the procedures of this place.
The member for Cypress Medicine Hat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is not a point of order. Again, I'll end with the question. Can you please explain to Albertans how a hidden and regressive tax grab is a fiscally conservative policy? Now, I appreciate why the member may have been confused, but in my first sentence, it ends with asserting that a bracket creep tax increases are a fiscally conservative policy. It's the same statement, just carried throughout the 20 seconds is all that this question took. And again, like the Premier, who some time ago was dead set against bracket creep and the regressiveness and the unfairness to family, and we had a change on that. In this case, Mr. Speaker, the first sentence is actually part of my question. This is a regressive tax on families, and both of my sentences include that statement. Thank you.
I appreciate the submissions, and as many members will know, that the preamble rule here inside the Assembly is one of the most difficult rules to create clear guidelines. And I know that the Deputy Government House Leader, while I appreciate the reference from House of Commons Procedures and Practices, also knows that the House of Commons has essentially completely departed from such a rule as a preamble rule. And there are fewer and fewer legislatures who continue to use such a rule, although we do hear perhaps the House of Commons Procedures Practices isn't the best reference in which to use because they no longer have the rule apply at all. I would say, and I have said, for independent members who get one question a week and have no other form, we have applied this rule quite liberally. Perhaps a poor choice of words. We've applied this rule very broadly. And so, as the member has pointed out, there is clear tying from the first portion of the question to the end of the question. I don't think that this is a point of order. I consider the matter dealt with and concluded. Orders of the day, orders du jour.
Consideration of Her Honor, the Lieutenant Governor's speech. Adjourned debate, Mr. Neudorf.
Are there others? Seeing none? Oh, the honourable member for Edmonton Ellerslie has risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an absolute pleasure and honor to serve the people of Edmonton Ellerslie over the last 6, going on now 7 years. And I grew up in this part of the city, and I feel a special connection to it. And I remember as a child having moved into the area, having so many beautiful memories, and I continue to carry with me to this day. Memories about the people and activities we used to do as children. For example, friends and I, we would jump on our bikes and go and explore new areas of Mill Woods that were still under construction. It was like we were going on our own little adventure to unknown lands. Edmonton Ellerslie is home to so many different ethnic and community cultural groups. In fact, 50% of the population of Edmonton Ellerslie are from an ethnically diverse community. And having come to this country, as many of them have, I have so much in common with people of these communities. Growing up in Edmonton Ellerslie was an opportunity to learn from people of so many different backgrounds. And as I often say in this house, we have a lot more in common than we have different. We all care about our families, putting food on the table, taking care of the ones that we love. And every day the people of Edmonton Ellerslie get up, go to work, and do what they have to do in order to support their families. It very much is a working class neighborhood. Of course, there are many small business owners that call Edmonton Ellerslie home as well, who are working hard to provide for their families as well. They're doing their very best to make sure to put food on their own table, and not only that, but leave a legacy for their loved ones, and especially their children. I think about all the people that I've interacted with and come to know over the last 6 years because of the role that I've played. For example, I recall the wonderful volunteers of the Millhurst, Southwood, Horizon, and Ellerslie Community Leagues. I'll give you the example of Leanne. Leanne lives in Southwood, but she's also a volunteer for the Millhurst Community League. And I remember meeting Leanne for the very first time. She had a smile on her face, but also that look like we don't talk politics around here. Because of course, for the Community League, it's about building unity through service to community. I guaranteed her that I'm a person that she could trust, and that ultimately, no matter what my role or affiliation, I was there to work with her and the rest of the volunteers to build a strong community. At first, what was a skeptical look over 6 years ago has become a kind embrace every time we see each other. Regularly attending community events over the years has given me that opportunity to be able to connect with everyday Albertans that are my constituents, to understand the real life issues, concerns, and problems that they're going through. Many a time I've spent at a community league event sitting, chatting with a constituent about a problem that they are experiencing in their life. And sometimes something very simple, and other times something as serious as a death in their family. It's through these conversations that I gain insight into doing my job as the MLA for Edmonton Ellerslie. To me, making sure that life is affordable is one of the most important aspects when it comes to representing people inside of this legislature. And as I mentioned so many times, these people are the salt of the earth, hardworking people. They don't earn exorbitant salaries, but they're happy to be contributing to their community and to this province that we all love. I mentioned the ethnic diversity of Edmonton Ellerslie, and I can tell you that the many community cultural groups indeed keep me busy with all the events they plan. Even during COVID, I had many a Zoom community event to attend, celebrating important festivals and days of religious observance, of course, for many different religions. these are also an opportunity to learn. I remember, and I'm thankful that very early on, someone in my life told me that other people's rules and customs are different. As children, you often hear children say, oh, that's weird. But I learned to recognize that these customs are just simply different. Although they weren't my own, I could still understand the meaning and significance, both cultural and religious, behind certain customs. And although they weren't my own, they were just as important and valid for the people who observed them. Again, even though we have a diversity of philosophy, religion, and perspective, we have much more in common than we have different. And these aren't the only opportunities to connect with my constituents. Right next to my office is a charming little neighborhood pub, which is actually called The Pub. And most days, especially during the spring and summer, there's always a group of people outside just hanging out, and it provides for me the opportunity to actually connect with them, hear their concerns, field their complaints about certain provincial matters of which they are very, very informed. Many a summer day, I've been leaving my office, closing up for the day, and as I exit the office, one of these constituents will strike up a conversation with me, sometimes that will last for hours. And I really don't mind, because I've always enjoyed listening to people and learning from their perspectives and gaining insight from the experiences that they've had in their own lives. So as I said, Madam Speaker, I'm very honored and privileged to serve the people of Edmonton-Ellerslie, because I get a lot out of it. My father used to tell me that there's a big difference between getting an education and going to school. Now, of course, he and my mother pushed me to go to university, but at the same time taught me that getting an education is not just something that happens inside of a classroom. It happens by actually sharing experiences with one another. Early on, I learned that we are all students and teachers at the same time. So through all of these conversations that I've had with my constituents on a regular basis, I know that at the end of the day, what's important for the people of Edmonton-Ellerslie, like most in Alberta, are their families and the ones that they love. Making sure that we have a society and an economy that serves the people. And yes, many of the families that I represent actually work in the petroleum industry. Many are subcontractors, skilled laborers, and some engineers. And in conversations with them, we can all agree that Alberta needs to diversify if we are to move forward as a province. No matter which door I knock on, everybody agrees that this should be the priority of the government of Alberta. And I often hear statements like, it's a no-brainer, or I've been saying that for years. And they can't help but wonder why this hasn't been the plan all along, conservative government after conservative government. Now, when we were in government, we created tax credit programs in order to provide an incentive to actually diversify and move Alberta forward. And many of those decisions were reversed when the UCP government came into power, Madam Speaker. And only a year or two later, they re-implemented some of them as if they were a creation of their own. Of course, the fact that they would re-implement an Alberta NDP policy decision makes me happy. It makes the people of Edmonton-Ellerslie happy. But what this government is doing is not enough. A lot of the families in Edmonton-Ellerslie have children going to post-secondary. They're all feeling the crunch of the higher tuition fees. Students in several programs at the University of Alberta, for example, will be facing staggering tuition fee increases this fall after the UCP Minister of Advanced Education signed off on hikes of 16 to 104% higher, as the member from Edmonton Northwest expressed just yesterday in this House. I hear from many of my constituents about how post-secondary is becoming unaffordable. It's absolutely essential that post-secondary education in this province be affordable and accessible to all. And I know that my colleagues and I on this side of the House will continue to fight for that, especially for all Alberta families. Of course, Madam Speaker, this isn't the only increased cost to Albertans. When the UCP government decided to take the cap off insurance, I heard from so many constituents about how their insurance rate was going up, and for some as high as 30%. even during this devastating time of the COVID pandemic. I remember early on hearing from a couple of teachers stating that because of the pandemic, they're staying home. Their cars are in their garage. They're not driving that much, maybe to go to the grocery store and back. And yet their insurance is skyrocketing. And to date, this government has done absolutely nothing to alleviate the pain of such high cost of insurance for the people of Alberta. Of course, as we heard in the last few weeks, utility bills are just completely out of control. It is the talk of the constituency. I can't tell you the number of emails and messages that I've received from constituents because of their utility bill. One lady, a single mom, told me that all of her income goes to pay for rent and electricity, and that she has to be very selective when going to the supermarket because life has become unaffordable for her and her daughter. This is completely unacceptable. I had another lady contact my office just the other day telling me that she's on income support and that she can't pay her bills. She has a child, she has a chronic illness, and she received a notice from EPCOR that her power is going to be shut off just in 3 days. Now, of course, I'm doing everything in my power along with my staff to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I want you to imagine the stress that this lady is going through when she gets a notice from EPCOR that her power is going to be shut off just in 3 days. Why does that even have to happen? This is a sign of the failure after failure of this government to provide a strong economy that includes everybody here in Alberta. These are both some of the examples of how life has become so unaffordable for so many. And I would argue that the economic disparity here in Alberta continues to grow, and this is an absolute shame. Because I know for a fact that Alberta, of which my constituents want to be a part of, is one where everybody has the opportunity and everyone is treated with dignity and respect that they deserve. That they are the focus of an economy that makes sure that no one is left behind. And unfortunately for the people of Edmonton-Ellerslie and all the people of Alberta, this government is failing to deliver on exactly that. I want to take an opportunity to address the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the work that we all need to do in order to create spaces to have a meaningful and genuine dialogue regarding the social injustices of the past and how Indigenous people have been treated. This is something that we continue to ignore. This is something that we cannot continue to ignore. Let me correct myself. And the government of Alberta should be front and center in recognizing these injustices and making sure that they don't happen again. But unfortunately, we have a system that has more Indigenous children in care now than there ever were children in residential schools or were picked up by the 60s scoop. With a group of Ellerslie constituents that actually care about this matter, we're addressing the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Last year for Canada Day, a group of my constituents decided to do a solidarity walk for all the children whose bodies were being found in mass graves at residential schools across Canada. It started because someone decided to put Canada flags on people's lawns without their consent. Now, as many of you know, Southeast Edmonton used to be known as Indian Reserve Number 136 of the Papas Chase Band. Many of the descendants of Papas Chase continue to live in the ridings of Edmonton-Ellerslie, Edmonton Mill Woods, and Edmonton Meadows. And it was some of these constituents, these descendants of Papas Chase, that organized with other non-Indigenous constituents that same solidarity walk that I was speaking of earlier. After the event, I decided to reach out to the organizers, and what they really wanted to do, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, was to hold regular opportunities to bring Indigenous ceremony into Edmonton Southwest. And we have been meeting for a few months now, and we've had one really successful event to celebrate the winter solstice. Now, when I was helping the group organize the event, one of the objectives was that it was going to be an opportunity for non-Indigenous people to learn about Indigenous ceremonies. But when the actual event was implemented, we found that Indigenous descendants, especially youth, were the ones that ended up coming to the event. They expressed that they didn't have many opportunities to engage in ceremonies, and that they were so grateful that they could come to a ceremony that it was actually in their area of the city. And this is but just one small step. Many of you may know of the community of Frog Lake and what happened there so many years ago. It is said that one of the warriors, Wandering Spirit, that was hung because of what happened, when asked for his final words, he decided to sing a love song to his wife. Now, I don't want to be misunderstood. I would never condone hurting, injuring, or killing anyone. What I am trying to point out is that we have in common is that we have a deep love for the people that surround us, our families and our friends. Now, that was a very frustrating time for Indigenous people. Some would argue that it continues to be a frustrating time. But all the more reason that we need to work together to make sure that Alberta has an economy that serves everybody, so that people don't get to the point of frustration when they feel like they have no hope left. I want to thank Denise, Camille, Mira, and Alana, who are the main...
Honourable member, any other members wishing to join the debate? Seeing the honourable member for Leduc Beaumont.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate that. And for the words from Edmonton Ellerslie, I would just like to adjourn debate.
Having heard the motion to adjourn debate, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried.
Committee of the Whole.
Honourable members, I'd like to call Committee of the Whole to order. Committee of the Whole has under consideration Bill 1, the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act. I would like to recognize the Honourable Minister of Culture.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I do have more to say about this. You know what? It's incredible. For most Albertans, I would venture to say everyone in this room, Queen Elizabeth II is the only monarch we have ever known. My goodness, she's been on the throne 70 years. During her reign, our province and our country have grown up. We've experienced incredible change and growth. And Alberta is a place where tradition is respected and progress is embraced. One of the great things about Alberta, where anyone from anywhere, literally, can succeed with hard work and determination. Alberta's greatness is demonstrated every day by its people, who work hard, who capture the beauty and soul of the province through their many creative endeavors, and especially by people who have helped lead this province through hard times and good times, and we've experienced both. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee gives us the opportunity to celebrate everything we have achieved together in the past 70 years, and to tell the stories that connect everyday Albertans like Lorna Smith from the village of Alex to the royal family. When I knew her, she was retired there with her husband. But here's the interesting story. Lorna's mother served as the personal secretary to Queen Elizabeth I, the Queen Mother. As a girl, Lorna and her mother both had HRH pins, Her Royal Highness pins, that granted them access to actually enter the palace at any time. And when she was about 13 or 14 years old, she tells us, she was invited with her mother to have tea with the Queen Mother in the palace ballroom. I think it was one of those kind of employee recognition kind of moments. One of Lorna's memories about that day was that the Queen Mother came in a mauve dress and actually served them the tea. Oh, I forgot one piece. They were actually picked up by one of the palace limousines. Very challenging for a 13-year-old girl to be picked up and go to the ballroom. She didn't actually want to go at first, but her mother made her go, and she said later, I'm glad she did. So what I'm getting at here is that the Jubilee is grand, and many of the events and the pageantry that come along with it, and the people of Alberta are intimately connected with that. It's a part of our life and part of our history in different ways. And so that's part of the reason we feel we should celebrate this. Across the province, you will find that some everyday Albertans have an interesting connection or memory to the royal family. I encourage people to share their stories of that. Most importantly, the Queen's Jubilee gives us the chance to thank the Albertans who have made it all possible here in Alberta. The Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act is Alberta's way of honoring Her Majesty's legacy and the Albertans who have embodied her commitment to community service and indeed world service. Under this legislation, a series of awards and scholarships will be established to help recognize people who have changed this province for the better. There are two levels of awards. There's the Premier's Award. The awardees are selected by one from every high school in Alberta, and they will be recognized for their citizenship and their contribution to the province. Out of that, the process then would be, out of that pool of recipients, there will be, let me get this right here. From that pool of a review panel will select the recipients of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Award, which will also have with it a series of financial awards or scholarships. There's two of those. There's the citizenship one, and then there's also 2 awards and scholarships that will be for the visual and performing arts and reward youth who have demonstrated outstanding ability in the visual and performing arts. These awards will be $7,000 each, increase from the $5,000 of the previous ones. It's an increase fitting really to the recognition of Her Majesty's 70 years of service, but it'll also help students pursue their goals and do what they need to do in their education. So these awards will replace the Queen's Golden Jubilee Awards, which were created in 2002. For the past 20 years, recipients of the Queen's Golden Jubilee Awards have moved on in life. They have become business leaders, talented artists, community builders, contributed immensely to our province and to the building of Alberta. The Alberta Foundation of the Arts will continue to be responsible for selecting the recipients of the Queen's Jubilee Scholarship for the Visual and Performing Arts. The others will be, as I mentioned, by a review panel. And these Albertans have all represented Alberta well, made their communities proud. The new iterations of the Queen's Awards will carry on the tradition of celebrating young people who have a future in this province. And although it's important to invest in young people, there are so many other Albertans who deserve recognition and achievement and contributions. That is why Bill 1 includes the creation of a medallion, a new one-time Queen's Platinum Jubilee medallion. The medallion will be awarded to 7,000 Albertans over the course of 2022. The eligibility criteria for this award will be broad so that the medal can recognize a wide range of accomplishments in many areas. For example, this could include people who have been heroes through the pandemic response, or who have worked towards reconciliation in their province, or who have just been community builders in amazing ways. To streamline the process, nominations will be accepted from nonprofit organizations, elected officials, and representatives from provincial organizations. This will ensure recipients can be selected and recognized during the Jubilee year, and we hope that the first medals will go out on the weekend of June 2 to 5 when we celebrate the Platinum Jubilee. The final piece of this legislation is intended to recognize the efforts and impact of members of the Alberta Executive Council. All of us here know how much effort and time and hard work Executive Council members on both sides of the House over the years have put into serving the people of Alberta, and their contributions since the creation of Alberta have helped build a vibrant and dynamic province for us. Bill 1 would designate all past, present, and future members of Executive Council as honorary members of Executive Council upon their retirement. This is a small gesture when compared to the monumental contributions they have made throughout Alberta's history. And it's a call to them to actually continue with a lifetime of service. Serving as an Executive Council is a step, but it calls for a lifetime of service. So in conclusion, Madam Chair, I just want to say that the Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act will help celebrate the reign of Her Majesty in the spirit that she has expressed, spirit of unity, the spirit of working together, and more importantly, it will show Albertans how much their contributions and leadership have been valued in this province. And I would like to end, Madam Chair, with a small quote from Chris Robertson. 20 years ago, he wrote of Canada. I think it's most appropriate for this particular time. Chris Robertson wrote that we have to develop a spirit of pride where we celebrate everything Canadian. Let's pay tribute to every great Canadian, glorious Canadian deeds, and Canadian trailblazers whatever their accomplishments. We need to put humility for our nation in the back seat. We need to shout for joy, celebrating Canada at every turn in life. We need pride that will allow us to steer our ship of Canada safely through the toughest crisis of nationhood. I want to live in a country where Canadians get goosebumps every time they see the maple leaf. That's the kind of spirit, Mr. Speaker, for Alberta that this Act seeks to encourage, and I encourage every member of the House to continue to support it. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Northwest.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the Minister to outline some more of the details in regards to Bill 1 here in Committee of the Whole. Yeah, I think that the official opposition has generally a positive view of this bill. I think there's places within it by which I think we can sharpen the focus, I believe, where it needs to be, which is with young people. I think that the 7,000 potential nominees for a Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee medal, we should think with first consideration to young people, because of course it's a reflection of what we hope to do, which is invest in the future, and people who are going to live longer and serve longer as Albertans in all ways possible could, of course, carry that honor with them for the rest of their lives. And so, again, the other element of this, which is the scholarships, again, that's a good reflection of a focus on young people, and I think that we just have to make sure we can use the medal part as a recognition for young people first and foremost as well. Another element of it, and I remember, having been in the legislature longer, that there was a centennial medal during our 100th anniversary of the province. And one element of the government of the day for distributing those centennial medals was to try to make sure we have both a geographic spread of the honors throughout the province and a specific focus on local recognition, people who know those places in each corner of the province and can reach in and give a high quality, perhaps, nomination and so forth for someone to get that kind of recognition. And so what the government of the day did with the centennial medals is they did a certain amount of those centennial medals to each of the 87 constituencies in the province for distribution and for nomination. So, I mean, as a constructive suggestion to the minister and to the government is that, you know, if we can have a way to use the natural geographic reach that we have here in the legislature with each of us as 87 representing 87 different areas in the province, that we could use that as a template for distribution and, you know, of course, MLAs making nominations to citizens that they know that are doing a great job in each of our constituencies. I know I gave a number of medals out in my constituency, and it was really great. You know, it really, and I still see those people today, right? And it certainly makes big impacts. The only other elements of this bill, before I just wanted to make a few brief comments, is just, you know, around it being Bill 1. And, you know, and traditionally what we see Bill 1 for each term or each session is sort of a signature piece of legislation that's driving the agenda of the government forward. And so, I mean, while this is all great, and certainly it's a worthwhile thing, the issue that I was really hoping was that Bill 1 could talk about affordability, because, of course, Madam Chair, we all know that inflation is almost unprecedented here in the province of Alberta, and it's affecting all of us in the broadest possible way. And you know, certainly it stems from energy prices, but you know, it was happening even before that as well, with supply issues and things that I don't know, that some people just were not even understanding, that we're still just learning about. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to look to address this affordability issue head on for all of our constituents and for the whole population of Alberta, because, and it's hitting hard and it's hitting fast. And we need to be preemptive and not reactive to help people out, right? The price of gasoline, for example, is going up every single day, right? I was informed by my wife at about 8 o'clock in the morning that she had taken the bus, which I hadn't heard about for an awful long time. And she said, you know what, I wanted to fill up the car, and it was like $1.70 a liter. And she said, and I just took the bus. And so, I mean, there's, ways by which we can deal with that. But I mean, lots of people in Alberta can't even take a bus because, they live in places that are not served by buses and so forth. And, the price of food is really going up fast as well. And then all of those other sundry things that people need, essentials for living, electricity, natural gas, the cost of renting apartments and so forth. Just everything is going up. And so yeah, I mean, while I do welcome the spirit of this bill and working through to recognize Albertans who are, and young people especially, who are making extraordinary contributions to our society, I also just, wanted to express that as well, that, let's not forget what the central purpose of our session is here, and how we need to address, first and foremost, number one, the whole affordability issue. So with that, Madam Chair, I will take my seat, and thank you very much.
Wonderful. The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today to express my support for this significant legislation, Bill 1, the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act. Madam Chair, I would like to firstly express my appreciation to the Lieutenant Governor for recommending the same to the Assembly, and I applaud Premier for sponsoring this bill that will recognize the amazing contribution Albertans have made to this beautiful province. Madam Chair, before I express my support to this bill, I would like to recognize all the hard efforts and contributions that have been made to ensure Albertans were protected and supported during the pandemic. As we mark the 70th year of Her Majesty's sovereignty, the proposed law will honor Albertans who have contributed to the betterment of the province through exceptional volunteerism, public service, and community leadership. Madam Chair, everyone who wants to make a difference would pursue a job in public service. It entails prioritizing the public good over personal gain. Many public employees claim that they choose public service to give back to their communities because they love doing so. Making a profession out of meaningful pursuits, money, status, and power aren't the only factors. Working as a public servant entails putting in long hours for great cause and being committed to your everyday duties of serving the public. I as well commemorate Her Majesty for taking her time out from her busy schedule to visit, tour our beautiful province back in 1951, 1959, 1990, 1973, and 2005. In 2002, the Queen Elizabeth II Golden Jubilee Recognition Act was passed by the Alberta government, commemorating the 50th anniversary of Her Majesty's accession to the throne by establishing special awards and scholarships to recognize Alberta youth who demonstrate excellence in citizenship through leadership, community service, and volunteerism. As well, Madam Chair, as exceptional ability in this visual and performing arts, Her Majesty was governed for longer than any other monarch in British history, and she has earned worldwide love and respect. Her exceptional reign has seen Her Majesty tour the world more than any previous queen, making several significant trips. The Queen has been an important figurehead for the UK and the Commonwealth during times of enormous social change, known for her sense of duty and devotion to a life of service. Madam Chair, one of the most significant aspects of the Queen's job is public and voluntary service. Her Majesty has ties with approximately 600 charities, military groups, professional bodies, public service organizations as royal patron or president. Her outstanding contribution in World War II. This range from well-known worldwide charities to tiny organizations focused on a specific issue or operating solely on a local level. Her Majesty continues to engage in a busy schedule of engagements, including visits to charities and schools, entertaining foreign heads of state, and leading the country in remembrance and joyous events, all of which are supported by other members of the royal family. Madam Chair, Her Majesty has always been supporting and encourages achievement from all walks of life through an annual program of investitures in which she bestows honors on members of the public, garden parties, receptions, and other awards given in her name, which allows her to express her gratitude to all those who have contributed to the nation's well-being. Madam Chair, in recognition of the efforts, Bill 1, Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act will contain awards, scholarship, plaque, and a 7,000 reward, which is 2,000 increase over the Queen's Golden Jubilee Awards. It is intended that 10 Albertans will receive this prize or scholarship each year for a total of $70,000 to commemorate Queen Elizabeth II's reign of 70 years. The Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act would also make all previous, present, and future Alberta Cabinet Ministers honorary members of Alberta's Executive Council. This award celebrates the numerous accomplishments made by Alberta premiers and ministers to our province. Madam Chair, in Alberta there has been many initiatives and awards rewarded to Albertans for the significant contribution in the province, such as Alberta Citizenship Awards, Alberta Northern Lights Volunteer Recognition Program, Great Kids Award, Heritage Awards, Ministers Senior Service Awards, Recognition, Volunteer Recognition Awards, and Stars of Alberta Volunteer Awards. Many of these outstanding awards pay tribute to the unsung heroes that make difference in communities around the province, from deserving youngster to adolescent who has done amazing things while facing adversity, to person, group, company, or municipality for their work to conserve, preserve, and promote Alberta's history. As well, Alberta recognizes individuals, corporations, and charitable organizations who have a positive impact on the lives of seniors and their communities should be honored. This awards honor Alberta volunteers who contribute to the development of recreation in our province community. Our government is commemorating the numerous people who have contributed to the well-being of this province. Bill 1 would also assist the next generation in reaching new heights of leadership and instilling a feeling of responsibility and service. Giving back is also an excellent way to get to know your surroundings. Working with others who are likewise concerned about the environment can help expand networking, as will assist you in better understanding of the conditions of other community members. Being an effective, empathic citizen requires having a broad, open-minded perspective of the various walks of life that surround you. You will never regret giving your time to help a cause that you are passionate about. It will enhance your life, introduce you to your community, introduce you to people and ideas that will have a good influence on your outlook of the rest of your life. Volunteering in your community allows you to grow as a person and gain a deeper understanding of how you fit in the world. Madam Chair, volunteerism, public service, and community leadership have all contributed to making Alberta one of the greatest places to live and work. And I encourage all members to support this Bill 1, Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act, which will promote and recognize the many people who have given back to this amazing and beautiful province we call our home through awards and scholarship. Again, I thank the Lieutenant Governor and Premier for recognizing the amazing contribution made here in Alberta. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there others? The Honourable Member for Drayton Valley Devon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to rise today and speak to Bill 1, the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act. I can say that word. Madam Chair, this nation is a young nation as far as its sovereignty is concerned. As a nation, we don't have a huge amount of history in comparison to a lot of other nations around the world. But in fact, our attachment to the monarchy is actually much longer and much deeper than the roots of our Canadian sovereignty, and it imbues the whole depth of our Canadian fabric, as it predates the creation of this great nation by many centuries. Canadians, I believe, understand the importance of the monarchy and the role that it has played in the history of our country. The monarchy has united us, and historically it has provided a haven for those who wanted to live under a parliamentary system of democracy. In the 1700s, the United Empire Loyalists, some of whom were members of my family, joined with the other colonists that were in British North America to create the colonies of British North America. It was our respect for the monarchy and our support for the parliamentary form of government that spurred the British North American colonies to unite against the Americans in the War of 1812 and even against the Fenian raids prior to 1867. The monarchy and our parliamentary form of government have provided its people with a strong and a stable and a productive government capable of meeting the needs of its people. Indeed, in 1867, with the passage of the British North American Act, the British colonies of North America peacefully transitioned into what we would call a self-governing colony under the monarchy when we became the Dominion of Canada. Canada, like a young person who grows into adulthood, slowly evolved into a sovereign state. World War I served as a as a pivotal moment, as our service in World War I proved to both Canadians and to the monarch and to the British Parliament and to the rest of the world that the citizens of Canada were capable and prepared to control not only their domestic affairs, but also their foreign affairs. By 1931, with the passage of the Statute of Westminster, Canada was prepared to make decisions regarding its foreign affairs, and so in 1939, when Europe and Britain, and indeed the rest of the world, was threatened by the expansion of fascism, Canada was prepared to defend its democracy, its monarch, and its historical mother country, and indeed the rest of Europe. My grandfather and several great uncles fought in World War II. One of them died in defense of this nation. And indeed, on VE Day, in the VE Day parade in my mom and dad's small hometown of Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, my mother led the Victory in Europe Day parade carrying the Union Jack. And the people proudly sang, "God Save the King." Canada has continued to evolve, and while we have distanced ourselves from some of the symbols of our colonial past, we have maintained our close alignment with the monarchy. Our present monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, was born in 1926, the firstborn child of King George VI. Her Majesty was crowned in Westminster Abbey on June the 2nd, 1953, upon the death of her father, King George VI. And in 1953, the Canadian Parliament passed the Royal Style and Titles Act, which formally made Elizabeth the Queen of Canada. It's one of the things that I had to remind my students when I was a teacher. When we talk about the Queen, we are not talking about the Queen of Great Britain. We're talking about the Queen of Canada. Like most Canadians, I've never known another monarch. Canada has changed a great deal over my lifetime, and many of the symbols of the monarchy have disappeared. We now have our own flag, and most Canadians today have not learned to sing the words of God Save the Queen in school. The royal insignia is no longer seen on every mailbox across this nation. But the one constant that has remained throughout my life is that of Queen Elizabeth II. She still reigns. It has in recent years become progressive to question the need for having a monarchy. I will start by saying that I have to admit that I am a monarchist. And I'm a monarchist for many reasons. Our entire parliamentary system of democracy is dependent on a monarch. Technically, the power of government is derived from the monarch. The monarchy is above the ebb and the flow of everyday politics. The monarch is the head of state and is, in the sense of party politics, apolitical. The monarch serves the people as the head of state. She is not the head of government. Governments come and governments go. Political parties and issues come and go. The monarch, especially this monarch, has remained. Remained as a stabilizing influence, remained above politics, remained to guide and provide advice, remained to remind us of our past and of our history and of who we are. Remained to provide us with a symbol of government that can speak to all of us above the waves and things that will divide us. Doesn't matter whether you're a conservative or whether you're a liberal or whether you're a member of the NDP party. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen of Canada, and her representatives, the Governor General or the Lieutenant Governors at a provincial level, are apolitical. They are symbols of unity that help to transcend our differences as Canadians. Bill 1 not only recognizes the importance of the monarchy in our nation, but significantly the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. This bill recognizes the truly remarkable reign, the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Her service began long before becoming our monarch. She helped to fight fascism. She helped to guide us and transition us from the end of the British Empire into the vibrant community we are part of called the British Commonwealth of Nations. She has dedicated herself to a life of service. She is a part of over 600 charities, 36 of which are in Canada. For all of my years, I have looked forward to the Queen's Christmas message. And I, like many Albertans, remember her visit to Edmonton during the Commonwealth Games. Bill 1 recognizes this long reign, this life of service, the longest reign of any British monarch and of any Canadian monarch. And so, this Platinum Jubilee Recognition Bill is going to create several ways of recognizing and celebrating the service of this monarch. The Platinum Jubilee is a chance to celebrate her legacy and of the service she has given to her people. Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Awards and scholarships will recognize young Albertans who are leaders in their communities and in the arts. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee Citizenship Award and scholarships would include a medallion and $7,000 prize in appreciation for the contributions of those individuals. The Queen Elizabeth Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act would also designate all former, current, and future Alberta Cabinet Ministers as honorary members of Alberta's Executive Council. This to honor and recognize the many contributions that Alberta's premiers and ministers have made to the province. A one-time Queen's Platinum Jubilee Medal has been created to recognize 7,000 worthy and dedicated Albertans throughout 2022. So the Act establishes 3 awards and scholarships: the Queen's Golden Jubilee Citizenship Medal, the Premier's Citizenship Award in recognition of the Queen's Golden Jubilee, and the Queen's Golden Jubilee Scholarship of the Visual and Performing Arts. Members of the Legislative Assembly, I would conclude by saying this. The Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act is a good bill to bring before this Assembly and to pass. In light of the 70 years of service of Her Majesty, it appears to me to be an appropriate way of recognizing a truly great and memorable monarch, and a monarch that is worth recognizing and celebrating. God save the Queen. God save the Queen.
Any other members wishing to join the debate on Bill 1 in Committee of the Whole? Seeing none, I will call the question. On Bill 1, the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Recognition Act, on the clauses of the bill, are you agreed? Any opposed? Carried. On title and preamble, are you agreed? Any opposed? Carried. Shall the bill be reported? Are you agreed? Any opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the committee rise and report Bill 1.
Having heard the motion to rise and report on Bill 1, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried. We shall now rise and report. The Honourable Member for Bonnyville, Cold Lake, St. Paul.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Committee of the Whole has had under consideration a certain bill. The committee reports the following bill. Bill 1.
Does the Assembly concur in the report? All those in favour, please say aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader, Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the Assembly be adjourned until 1:30 p.m. Monday, March 14th, 2022.
Having heard that motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Any opposed? Please say no. That is carried. House stands adjourned until Monday at 1:30.